Why Emma is an underrated heroine. Emma Woodhouse gets a lot of stick as an unlikable character compared to Austen's other leading ladies. People say she is spoilt and selfish and a bit of a snob. Jane Austen herself said of Emma, "I am going to take a heroine whom no one but myself will much like." But I see some really good qualities in her character. She is independent, confident, headstrong, incredibly caring, and patient with her father to the point of selflessness, and she has a strong sense of right and wrong. For example, when it comes to the behaviour of Frank Churchill and Mr. Elton. I'll be exploring these virtues in this video, but don't worry, I will also cover some of the negative parts of Emma's character. After all, none of us are perfect. Number 1. She's independent and doesn't want to get married. What I love about Emma is that she doesn't feel the need to get married. She tells Harriet, "Fortune I do not want, employment I do not want, consequence I do not want. I believe few married women are half as much mistress of their husband's house as I am of Hartfield." Emma is wealthy, admittedly, and therefore does not have the same impetus to marry for security like the anxious Mrs. Bennet does for her daughters. But still, in this century, an unmarried woman is not seen in a flattering light, and the fear of becoming an old maid is a very real pressure put on even wealthy women in society at that time. And indeed, a shocked Harriet even responds to Emma, telling her she would be an old maid and how awful this would be. Again, Emma shows her strength of feeling on this, and again, a sense of independence by replying that she would have no trouble in finding occupation for her mind and would dote on caring for her nieces and nephews in old age. If Emma was to marry, she would come under the control of her husband, and she recognises the freedom and liberties she has currently running her father's house could be taken away. She is independent and confident enough in herself to go against the grain and not marry as expected of her by society, and I really admire this. Number 2. She cares for her father to the point of selflessness. As we all know, Emma's father is hard work. He frets over the smallest things, constantly needs to be reassured, and is rather an anxious character in general. Emma is very caring towards him and patient and clearly adores him. She even reconsiders whether she should follow her heart and marry Mr. Knightley, as she is so concerned about the effect it would have on her father. To sacrifice being with the person she loves and her future happiness, this is a very selfless act indeed. Jane Austen even said that she imagined after the novel was finished that Emma and Mr. Knightley end up living with Mr. Woodhouse for a few years after their marriage just to please him. Number 3. Emma hangs out with Miss Bates even though she is really annoying. Yes, Miss Bates is poor, but she is also rather irritating with her constant talking and prattling on. Can you imagine spending hours in the company of someone who is that irritating? And to sit and smile and sip tea and not let that show? Emma does this for years because she believes it's her duty to include Miss Bates into the social activities that she does and support her. Not many people would do that, and this is again an example of her selflessness, though I will discuss the picnic incident later on. Number 4. She loves Mrs. Weston dearly, but encourages her marriage to the detriment of her own loneliness. Emma was very close to her governess, Mrs. Weston, and must have been especially so after her elder sister leaves the home to marry Mr. John Knightley. Yet to encourage the happiness of Mrs. Weston, she assists in matching her with Mr. Weston, which results in a happy marriage, and Mrs. Weston leaving the home and Emma behind. Even Emma's father selfishly bemoans Emma meddling in causing Mrs. Weston to leave, and Emma herself must feel her loss deeply. Now alone, without female companionship, and just her father to keep her company. Again, she could have been selfish and kept Mrs. Weston by her side and not encouraged the situation, but she does not. Number 5. Emma's scorn for those who act unjustly. Emma shows again she has a strong sense of right and wrong and high standards of behaviour for a gentleman to follow. Firstly, with Mr. Elton. Again, an example of Emma's worthy character. She can see past Harriet Smith's birth situation, that she was born out of wedlock, and her naivety and goodness makes her believe a man in love with too. But she is very mistaken by Mr. Elton. He says this of the idea of marrying Harriet: "There are men who might not object to. Everybody has their level, but as for myself, I am not, I think, quite so much at a loss. I need not so totally despair of an equal alliance as to be addressing myself to Miss Smith. No, madam." Later on, Emma later says of Mr. Elton to Mr. Knightley, "I do own myself to have been completely mistaken in Mr. Elton. There is a littleness about him which you discovered, and which I did not." Another person who is on the receiving end of Emma's scorn is Frank Churchill, after she discovers that he was engaged to Jane Fairfax the whole time and pretended not to be, even flirting with another woman, herself, in front of Jane. She tells Mr. and Mrs. Weston that his behaviour is unbecoming. This following quote shows how much Emma holds men up to an ideal. She says of Frank Churchill, "It has sunk him, in my opinion, so unlike what a man should be, none of that upright integrity, that strict adherence to truth and principle, that disdain of trick and littleness which a man should display in every transaction of his life." Number 6. I mentioned this briefly early on, but Emma passes absolutely no judgment on the fact that Harriet is born out of wedlock, at a time where this was a huge taboo. Normally, an unmarried woman who gave birth to a child at this time was forced to marry the father of her unborn child, and not doing this was considered distasteful by society. Even Mr. Knightley reminds Emma of this and tells her not to encourage Harriet to set her sights too high. Emma, however, perhaps owing to her love for Harriet, or owing to her naivety, or even because she sees it as her own personal challenge to find Harriet a better match, does not accept this as being detrimental to Harriet, and believes she should not be punished for the sins of her parents. Again, not a common view at this time, and another example of Emma being a little forward-thinking and just, and headstrong in her convictions. The negatives. Yes, Emma can be a snob. She tells Harriet that she must lose her as a friend forever, as she would never be able to visit her as a Mrs. Martin at Abbey Mill Farm. This is undoubtedly difficult to look past from a modern perspective and comes across as a little mean, but also this was just another rule of their society. It would also not be seen as appropriate for Mr. Knightley to hang out at Mr. Martin's house and share a cup of ale of an evening. They were two completely different classes and could not be mixing socially. Emma even says that Harriet's father was clearly a gentleman, so perhaps she has convinced herself of that in order to justify her friendship and making a better match for Harriet. Another snobby move on Emma's part is when she remarks that she cannot attend a party thrown by the Coles as they are from trade, meaning they were not born into wealth but have made their money recently from an occupation Emma feels is beneath her and her family. She does, however, change her mind when she realises that her friends are attending, so perhaps Emma can change her mind on this and learn differently? The picnic. We can't forget about the picnic. Yes, Emma's jest was at Miss Bates's expense, and no one but Frank Churchill found it remotely funny. But how many of us have made an ill-timed or ill-thought-out joke in the moment and it gone down like a lead balloon? Also, like I mentioned before, Emma has sat patiently with Miss Bates for years, even though her behaviour is so very frustrating. Is it not okay for sometimes that patience to snap? Yes, Emma upset Miss Bates, and I agree it was something she shouldn't have done, but she did intend it as a joke and it didn't intend for it to hurt. She does show remorse afterwards. Admittedly, Mr. Knightley had to tell her off first, but she does go to Miss Bates the next day with a basket. She clearly feels guilty. My last comment is how confident Emma is in society. She is not shy or reserved. She is popular. She is a good hostess. She hits it off with Frank Churchill immediately. She is open about her love of balls and socializing, about her insecurities about travel, and she shows excitement. I love that about her. She doesn't hide her feelings, and this is something Mr. Knightley likes too. It's why he complains of this about Jane Fairfax. She wants openness. She is reserved, more reserved, I think, than she used to be, and I love an open temper. He likes Emma. So that's my summary on why Emma should be given more credit than she gets. Do check out our other videos and subscribe for new content.